Charlotte Briggs was 21 when she got the job, quote, nobody wanted, which was being Prince Andrew's maid after he divorced Sarah Ferguson in 1996.
Behind the grand walls of Buckingham Palace, a young maid once believed she had found her dream job, serving royalty. But what she discovered instead was something far darker. Prince Andrew, known to the world as the Queen's charming son, revealed a side that few could imagine. From screaming over curtains to worshipping teddy bears, his behavior broke every illusion of nobility. And what this maid finally revealed would shake the royal image to its core. The maid, who shattered the royal illusion. Charlotte Briggs was only 21 when she stepped through the grand gates of Buckingham Palace. She had grown up hearing stories of grace, elegance, and duty. When she was offered a position as a maid in the household of Prince Andrew, she believed she had entered a world of refinement and honor. The thought of serving the royal family filled her with pride. She imagined quiet corridors scented with polish, the soft hum of tradition, and the chance to witness history from within its golden walls. The reality was nothing like she had imagined. Within days, she discovered that the prince's household was ruled not by grace but by fear. Prince Andrew was not the charming man seen smiling at cameras or attending charity events. Behind closed doors, he was impatient, demanding, and often cruel. Staff whispered warnings to one another in the corridors, but always in low voices, for the walls had ears. Every task was treated as a test of loyalty. A curtain drawn slightly off-center could unleash a storm of shouting. A breakfast tray arriving 2 minutes late meant a lecture that could last half an hour. Even the smallest error felt dangerous. Charlotte learned quickly that perfection was not a goal, but a command. Every object in his rooms had to remain exactly as he wanted it. His teddy bears were placed according to a laminated guide that showed their exact positions. His pajamas were folded in identical patterns each morning. He would inspect the work with eyes that noticed everything. Charlotte remembered one morning when she entered to draw the curtains. The sunlight spilled unevenly across the room. He saw it at once. His voice rose in anger, accusing her of carelessness. She tried to explain that the fabric had caught on a hook, but he refused to listen. He called her useless and ordered her out. She closed the door behind her with trembling hands, her face burning. That night, she could not sleep. She lay awake, replaying the moment, wondering how such a small mistake could cause so much fury. For the maids, each day began with anxiety. They spoke little at breakfast, afraid of being overheard. Even their laughter felt dangerous. The palace itself seemed to breathe with tension. Orders were barked, footsteps echoed, and somewhere in the distance, the prince's voice could be heard complaining about a misplaced pen or a crooked cushion. The grandeur of the surroundings only made the fear worse. The glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors felt like a cruel disguise for what really happened behind them. Charlotte began to notice more than anger. There were patterns in the late-night movements of staff and visitors. Certain people came and went quietly. Doors closed quickly when she passed. Some matters were never discussed. The silence was part of the job. Everyone knew that questioning anything could cost them their position. She realized that the household ran on secrecy and obedience. The contrast between the prince's public image and his private behavior unsettled her deeply. She would watch him on television, shaking hands, smiling, and speaking kindly to children. Yet she knew the same man could reduce a maid to tears over the angle of a lampshade. The divide between what the world saw and what the staff endured grew wider each day. Over time, the stress began to erode her health. She woke each morning with a knot in her stomach, terrified of making a mistake. Her hands shook when she carried trays. Sleep became a luxury. She would lie in her narrow room listening for footsteps in the corridor, fearing that someone might call her name. The job that once filled her with pride had turned into a cage. But the maid soon discovered that these behaviors didn't emerge overnight. They had roots in Andrew's upbringing, where cruelty, unchecked privilege, and early misbehavior set the stage for what was to come. The making of a spoiled prince. From the beginning, Prince Andrew lived in a world that bent around him. Born into the most powerful family in Britain,
honouring the first child born to a British reigning sovereign for over 100 years.
he grew up surrounded by luxury and ceremony. Every need was met before he could voice it. He was the Queen's second son, close enough to the throne to enjoy privilege, yet distant enough to escape the pressure of real duty. That mixture of privilege without purpose would shape him in ways few could correct. Even as a child, he stood apart from his siblings. Prince Charles was quiet and cautious, always aware of the weight of expectation. Princess Anne was sharp, independent, and strong-willed. Andrew was different. He carried himself with the certainty of someone who believed rules were for others. Household staff remembered a boy who demanded attention and reacted with anger when it was not given. When guards stood for inspection, he mocked their rigid posture, laughing at their discipline. One officer recalled the young prince marching in front of the guards, pulling faces to make them break formation. It was meant to be a joke, yet there was something cruel in his pleasure at their discomfort. In the royal stables, his behavior grew worse. The grooms remembered a child who tormented the animals. He would tug at a horse's tail or throw pebbles at its flank just to see it rear. On one occasion, he kicked a dog that barked at him. The stable hands had seen enough. They took their revenge in silence. One day, they tricked him into the stalls and tipped a barrow of manure over his head. The story became part of palace legend. Andrew was furious, but also humiliated. Still, the lesson did not last. He learned only that others might laugh behind his back, not that his actions were wrong. At school, he gained more nicknames than friends. Baby Grumpling and the Sniggerer were the ones that stuck. They came from his habit of sulking when corrected and laughing cruelly when others stumbled. Teachers found him difficult. He would challenge authority, refuse instructions, and use his royal status as a shield. One teacher said he was a boy who wanted admiration without earning it. Another noted that Andrew's confidence crossed easily into arrogance. The young prince did not seek respect through effort. He assumed it was his birthright. His environment fed that belief. At the palace, he was never truly held to account. Mistakes were excused, tempers ignored, and complaints softened. He grew up seeing staff lower their eyes and bow their heads. The idea that anyone might refuse him seemed impossible. He watched the world revolve around the monarchy and believed that it revolved around him personally. Every privilege reinforced the notion that he was special, that ordinary rules could not touch him. When he joined the Royal Navy, some hoped the discipline would change him. At first it seemed to. The uniform, the rank structure, and the thrill of flight training appeared to give him purpose. He served in the Falklands War and returned home a decorated pilot. The public saw a young hero. For a moment, it looked as if responsibility had steadied him. Yet beneath the surface, little had changed. Those who served with him spoke of his vanity and his need for attention. He bragged about his royal connections and treated subordinates with the same dismissive tone he had once used with palace staff. His wartime service became another layer of pride, not a lesson in humility. The arrogance that had begun in childhood had matured into entitlement. He had learned to wear charm in public, to smile for cameras, to play the part of the dutiful son. But in private, he still expected obedience, still demanded admiration, still believed the world existed for his amusement. And, as Andrew matured into adulthood, that sense of entitlement evolved, not just into royal privilege, but into a pattern of lavish spending, unchecked access, and moral erosion. What looked like mere Playboy antics would soon reveal something far darker. The Prince of Privilege and Corruption. In his early adult years, Prince Andrew moved through high society like a man born for its spotlight. The cameras adored him. He was young, handsome, and carried the easy confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. After his return from the Falklands War, he became the most eligible bachelor in Britain. His name appeared on guest lists for every grand event, from London galas to ski parties in Verbier. He danced, drank, and laughed in circles that sparkled with wealth and privilege. To many, he was the royal playboy, a prince who had earned his freedom through service and was now enjoying its rewards. When he married Sarah Ferguson in 1986,
Sarah and Andrew married in Westminster Abbey in July 1986.
the nation celebrated. Their wedding seemed full of laughter and warmth, yet the fairy tale began to crumble almost immediately. Andrew's long absences, his short temper, and his hunger for admiration strained the marriage. Sarah was lively and impulsive, but she soon felt the chill of palace life. The distance between them widened until separation became inevitable. Their divorce in 1996 ended the illusion of happiness, but not their connection. They remained close in a way that puzzled outsiders. Friends whispered that Andrew could never fully let go of her, even while surrounding himself with other women. As a royal without a clear role, he was given the title of Special Representative for Trade and Investment. On paper, it sounded grand. In practice, it gave him access to power, luxury, and endless opportunity for influence. He traveled the world, meeting billionaires and business leaders. His schedule was filled with private jets, exclusive resorts, and extravagant dinners where deals were whispered over wine. Officially, he was promoting British trade. Unofficially, he was building a network that blurred the line between diplomacy and personal gain. By the late 1990s, the charm that had once captivated people began to fade. Reports surfaced of secret meetings and questionable partnerships. Journalists spoke of businessmen paying for introductions to the royal circle. The phrase, "cash for access," started appearing in headlines. The palace denied everything, yet the rumors stuck. Andrew seemed untouchable, but the shine of royalty was beginning to tarnish. Away from the cameras, he indulged a lifestyle that shocked even those accustomed to privilege. He flew in helicopters to avoid London traffic. He used private jets for trips that could have been made by train. Weekends were spent at lavish estates or Mediterranean villas. He surrounded himself with models, actresses, and socialites. The press gave him a new nickname that captured both his reputation and his recklessness. They called him Randy Andy. For years it followed him, a reminder that his charm had turned into caricature. As Britain faced economic austerity, the public grew less forgiving. People who struggled to pay bills read stories about a prince who spent fortunes on luxury. Anger replaced fascination. Letters poured into newspapers demanding to know why taxpayers should fund such extravagance. Inside the palace, aides began to worry. They noticed his mood swings, his flashes of temper, his need to control every detail. Some described him as paranoid, convinced that leaks were coming from his own staff. Others spoke of a growing isolation, a prince surrounded by yes-men and sycophants. Behind closed doors, the tone of his household shifted. Where once there had been formality, now there was fear. Assistants whispered of meetings that felt more like interrogations. He demanded loyalty and punished even small acts of disobedience. Few dared to question his choices. The arrogance that had marked his youth had matured into something darker. It was during this time that new names began to appear in his social circle. Wealthy Americans with powerful friends entered the picture. Among them were Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, figures who moved easily through the same glittering world. Their charm and connections appealed to Andrew's sense of importance. To him, they were glamorous companions who shared his appetite for luxury and attention. To others, they would soon become the source of scandal that would shake the monarchy to its core. Because behind the bright lights and power lunches was a hidden connection, one that would drag the prince into one of the most infamous scandals of the era and shift his fate forever. The shadow of Epstein. Prince Andrew's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein began in the late 1990s, introduced by Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman who had long moved through the same wealthy and titled circles as the prince. She was charming, well-connected, and close to Epstein, who was then seen as a mysterious financier with powerful friends. To Andrew, Epstein appeared as another figure of influence, a man who could open doors in the world of money and prestige. What began as a social acquaintance soon turned into something deeper. Epstein's lavish parties, private jets, and luxury homes fit neatly with Andrew's own appetite for privilege. Over the years, Their friendship became well known among the elite. Andrew visited Epstein's mansion in New York, stayed at his Palm Beach home, and traveled on his private jets. There were even guest lists that showed his name among the regular visitors. To outsiders, it seemed like another royal friendship built on status and convenience. But behind the glamour lay a network of exploitation that few yet understood. In 2008, Epstein was convicted for soliciting a minor for prostitution and sentenced to prison. Most of his high-profile friends distanced themselves at once. Yet Andrew did not. Instead, he was photographed with Epstein again 2 years later, walking through Central Park in December 2010, smiling as if nothing had happened. The image shocked the world. People asked why a member of the royal family would publicly associate with a convicted sex offender. The palace offered only brief statements. Andrew, it said, regretted the friendship. But his actions told another story. He had stayed at Epstein's New York mansion during that same visit. Staff there recalled laughter, dinners, and long conversations. For many observers, the sight of the prince chatting comfortably with Epstein so soon after his release was unforgivable. Then came Virginia Giuffre. In 2015, she came forward with a story that would shatter what remained of Andrew's reputation. She said that as a teenager, she had been trafficked by Epstein and forced to have sexual encounters with the prince. She described 3 occasions: in London, in New York, and on Epstein's private island in the Caribbean. Her claims were detailed and consistent. She spoke of being introduced to him by Ghislaine Maxwell, of being told what to do, of being treated as if her consent did not matter. The photograph of Andrew with his arm around her waist, taken in a London townhouse.
It was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life. I had just been abused by a member of a royal family.
Became one of the most damning images in royal history. Maxwell stood smiling in the background. Andrew said he had no memory of ever meeting Virginia. He insisted the photograph was fake, but photo experts examined it and found no evidence of alteration. Every detail matched the house, the furniture, and the lighting. His denial only deepened suspicion. The palace scrambled to contain the fallout. Statements were issued declaring his innocence. Interviews were arranged to show his composure. Yet, the public mood had changed. People were no longer willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. The tone of the coverage turned from curiosity to disgust. Commentators who once called him misguided now called him reckless. Even within royal circles, there was silence, as if distance could erase connection. Andrew's own behavior made everything worse. He appeared detached, even defiant. He gave no sense of empathy for Epstein's victims. Instead of condemning the abuse, he spoke of his regret for staying with a man who had behaved badly. To many, his words felt cold and self-centered. The infamous television interview meant to clear his name became a disaster. His explanations sounded rehearsed and unbelievable. When he claimed he could not sweat, people laughed rather than sympathized. And then came the moment that changed everything. The televised interview that was supposed to set the record straight, but instead accelerated his downfall. The BBC interview that ended everything. On November 16, 2019, Prince Andrew sat down with BBC journalist Emily Maitlis for a special episode of Newsnight. Cameras rolled inside Buckingham Palace, and for the first time since the Jeffrey Epstein scandal erupted, the Duke of York was ready to set the record straight. What unfolded over the next 50 minutes was not redemption, but one of the most catastrophic interviews in royal history. From the start, Andrew seemed calm and confident, as if convinced he could charm his way through. But every question from Maitlis peeled back another layer of arrogance. When asked about his friendship with Epstein, Andrew admitted to visiting him after his conviction, claiming it was convenient to end their friendship in person.
As it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends. And certainly going to Jeffrey's was not about partying. Absolutely not.
The word echoed with cold detachment. Millions watching at home felt disbelief. He was defending a decision to stay in the home of a convicted sex offender because it was convenient. Then came the moment that turned a scandal into a spectacle. Virginia Giuffre had alleged that she met the prince at a London nightclub and described him as sweating profusely while dancing with her. Andrew responded by saying that was impossible. He claimed that due to a medical condition brought on by an overdose of adrenaline during the Falklands War, he was unable to sweat at that time. It was an excuse so strange that it instantly became infamous. Viewers stared, unsure if he was serious. Within hours, social media was flooded with jokes, memes, and headlines calling him the sweaty non-sweater. But the most damaging moment was his attempt at an alibi. Giuffre had said the alleged meeting took place on March 10, 2001. Andrew countered by saying he remembered that particular night clearly because he was at a Pizza Express in Woking with his daughter. The explanation sounded absurd. The image of a senior royal defending himself with a family pizza outing felt surreal. Journalists later confirmed that the restaurant did exist, but the detail only deepened the ridicule. It became a punchline across Britain, a symbol of how detached from reality the Duke had become. Throughout the interview, Andrew showed no trace of empathy for Epstein's victims. He spoke as if the tragedy revolved around him, his reputation, and his misfortune. Maid gave him multiple opportunities to express regret or sympathy, yet he never did. Instead, he insisted that staying friends with Epstein had been useful, and that he did not regret the friendship as a whole. To many viewers, it sounded like a man incapable of understanding the gravity of what he was accused of. By the next morning, the backlash was everywhere. Major newspapers called it a train wreck. Royal insiders were horrified. The Queen herself was reportedly shocked at how poorly her son had handled himself. Within 4 days, the palace announced that Prince Andrew would step back from public duties for the foreseeable future. The statement was carefully worded, but everyone understood what it meant. The Queen's favorite son had effectively been exiled. The Newsnight interview didn't just damage his reputation, it ended his public life. It exposed the arrogance and detachment that had been whispered about for years, stripping away the illusion of royal dignity. The man who once represented Britain abroad now became its embarrassment. But stepping back wasn't enough. As public anger grew and victims demanded justice, the law began to close in. Soon, the Duke of York would face the one thing his title could no longer protect him from: accountability. The price of silence. When Virginia Giuffre filed a civil lawsuit against Prince Andrew in August 2021 under the Child Victims Act, the royal family faced one of the most damaging crises in its modern history. The case was filed in a New York court and accused Andrew of sexual assault when Giuffre was just 17. Her lawyers described repeated encounters arranged by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, painting a picture of coercion and abuse that could no longer be ignored. For years, Andrew had brushed aside such claims as false. Now, they were laid out in a legal document that named him directly. The lawsuit made headlines across the world. The idea that a senior royal was being sued in an American court was almost unthinkable. The palace issued a short statement saying that Andrew denied all allegations, but the silence that followed spoke louder than words. His lawyers tried to have the case dismissed, arguing that a previous settlement between Giuffre and Epstein protected him. The judge rejected that claim. For the first time, Andrew faced the real possibility of being forced to testify under oath about his relationship with Epstein and his conduct toward Giuffre. Inside Buckingham Palace, the mood was tense and fearful. The Queen, nearing the end of her reign, was forced to confront a scandal that threatened to stain the monarchy itself. Courtiers held emergency meetings. Advisors studied legal papers and press briefings, trying to contain the damage. The palace could no longer separate itself from Andrew's personal choices. Every headline tied his name to the crown. The royal family's centuries-old image of dignity and duty was at risk. In January 2022, the Queen took decisive action. The palace announced that Prince Andrew was being stripped of his military titles and royal patronages. It was a moment of quiet humiliation. Regiments that once called him their honorary colonel were instructed to remove his name. Charities that had carried his royal crest cut ties overnight. From that day forward, he would no longer use the style His Royal Highness in any official capacity. The statement ended with a chilling line that he would defend his case as a private citizen. The message was clear. The institution was protecting itself, not him. Behind closed doors, family relationships grew strained. Prince Charles and Prince William were said to have urged the Queen to act, fearing that the scandal would overshadow the monarchy's future. Even within Andrew's circle, support began to fade.
There is no good time to talk about Mr. Epstein and all things.
Longtime aides resigned. Friends kept their distance. The man who had once moved with confidence through global society was now isolated. The damage to his standing was irreversible. His official roles were gone. His public appearances vanished. Even his place in family events became uncertain. During the Queen's final months, he appeared beside her only rarely, walking silently behind his siblings at ceremonies, but holding no authority. When Charles became king, Andrew's exile deepened. Plans for his return to public life were quietly abandoned. Even in the shadows, Andrew's story was far from over. Rumors, leaked emails, and new revelations would continue to surface, further eroding what little remained of his status. The ghost of the monarchy. By 2025, Prince Andrew lived not as a royal in honor, but as a man in quiet disgrace. Once a figure of status and ceremony, he now existed on the outer edges of the monarchy, a private citizen in everything but name. The grand palaces where he once entertained guests were closed to him. His diary, once filled with official duties and overseas trips, was empty. The man who had once enjoyed the privilege of command now spent his days hidden from the world that had turned against him. Life at Royal Lodge in Windsor had become a form of gilded exile. Few visitors came. His name no longer appeared in court circulars or royal bulletins. The gates that had once opened at his arrival now seemed to keep him inside. Those who had known him for decades said he moved with a kind of restless routine, walking the same paths each morning, calling the same aides, clinging to habits that gave shape to his shrinking world. He remained proud, still convinced that time would soften the public's anger. But outside his walls, the country had already moved on. In October 2025, a new chapter in his downfall began. Reports confirmed that the formal process to remove his remaining styles and the title of prince had been set in motion. The decision came from within the highest levels of the royal household, backed by the government's approval. It was a move without modern precedent. No senior royal in living memory had been stripped so completely of identity. The announcement shocked some, but for most, it felt inevitable. The scandals had lingered too long, the damage too deep. The monarchy could not afford his presence any longer. Soon after, came word that he would be required to leave Royal Lodge, the sprawling home he had occupied for decades. The property, once a symbol of stability and privilege, became the final reminder of what he had lost. Staff were quietly reassigned. Removal vans were seen beyond the trees. For the royal family, it was a painful but necessary act, meant to show that no one, not even the Queen's own son, could escape accountability. For Andrew, it was exile made absolute. The stripping of titles was more than a legal measure. It was an act heavy with meaning. To remove the word prince from his name was to erase centuries of inherited power from his identity. It marked the end of his role within the institution that had defined his life. For the monarchy, it was a declaration that survival required sacrifice. For the public, it was proof that the royal family had finally listened to the outrage that had simmered for years. Inside the quiet of his new home, those who still spoke to him said that he remained trapped in the habits that once defined him. His fixation on order had grown worse. The bathwater had to be at a precise temperature. His shirts were still folded to exact measurements. He spent hours reviewing trivial matters, as if control over small details could replace the control he had lost over his life. His siblings rarely visited, and yet, in those silent halls, surrounded by relics of a past life, the folded shirts, the lined-up teddy bears, the drawn curtains, Prince Andrew remained frozen in time. He was still waiting for the world to forgive him, never realizing that forgiveness was something he could no longer command. What do you think about the shocking side of Prince Andrew that his maid revealed? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take on this royal scandal.